The negative effects of the Ukraine-Russia war continued to ravage Russia. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's war policy in the Ukraine war caused irreparable losses both economically and militarily. Vladimir Putin falls into a Great Depression after successive defeats in Ukraine, and Putin's pressure on the Russian people and army is increasing. The Russians have started protesting and rioting in the streets after Putin's last statements. There are big rebellions against the Kremlin administration, and the lucky Russians who get the opportunity are leaving the country. The plane tickets are sold out and all the flights are full. The trains are jammed and the Russians are fleeing in panic. The footsteps of the revolution are slowly being heard in the country, and the sparks of the revolution are spreading. Now let's dive into the great turmoil inside Russia with all the striking developments. The Russian leader, who was constantly exposed to criticism, arrows from the public and politicians, made a development that will lift the country up. Russian President Putin announced the partial mobilization in Russia in a televised speech on Wednesday, September 21st. The decision of the Russian leader shook the agenda deeply in order to stop the continuation of losses in the Russia-Ukraine war. Russian leader Putin stressed that the declaration of mobilization is necessary in order to make significant progress in Ukraine. The Russian leader also announced that more than 300,000 citizens will be recruited across the country to fill the loss of about 60,000 Russian soldiers on the Ukrainian front. For the Russian citizens who opposed this decision, the fact that the judicial path was open started to make the Russians very uneasy. The first reactions to Putin's decision to declare mobilization came from Kremlin critics. Until now, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has described the war between Ukraine and Russia as a military operation. The fact that Putin, who was against the World War until about 2 months ago and wanted the World War to be censored in the Russian media, has now declared a nationwide mobilization, and growing Kremlin critics and the opposition in the parliament. The Russian people became very worried after the mobilization decision announced by Putin. Many of the Russian citizens have even started to leave Russia as of today, while the Ukraine-Russia war continues to pull the Russians into the middle of a dark era militarily and politically. The Russian economy has also taken its share from the war in Russia, where inflation has reached serious figures and citizens continue to protest against Putin in revolt. Everything is in a mess. Tens of thousands of anti-war Russian citizens suffer from the dwindling socio-economic opportunities. The decision to declare mobilization made by Putin is of great interest to more than 300,000 male Russian citizens. Therefore, many of the Russian male population, unwilling to fight in Ukraine, began to seek ways to escape countries that do not require visa. Turkey is the primary escape for Russians. Since Russian citizens do not require a visa, they begin to rapidly deplete their stocks of plane tickets to escape to Turkey. First Avia Sales Group, which sells world-famous airline tickets, announced that direct flight tickets from Moscow to Istanbul are sold out. Another stop for Russian citizens who want to escape from the mobilization decision is Armenia. Russian citizens who had the chance to enter this country without a visa, just like Turkey, started to leave Russia, taking their children and relatives with them. Kremlin opposition politician Alexei Navalny, who is currently in prison, also made a statement about the mobilization decision in the video recorded inside the prison under the supervision of Navalny's lawyers. The Kremlin dissident said it is obvious that the war is getting worse, deepening, and Putin is trying to absorb as many people as possible into it. Vladimir Putin expressed his reaction with the words he wants to shed this blood on hundreds of thousands of people. Wesna, the Russian pro-democracy youth group, called on Russian citizens to organize a full-blown protest. This mobilization decision is equivalent to throbbing thousands of fathers of children, husbands, and brothers into the meat grinder, regardless of age, Westona Group said in a statement. Now war has come to every house and every family. These words show how serious the situation is in Russia. The proposal to establish an investigation office on the Russian Defense Ministry, which has been on the agenda of the Russian parliament in recent days, was rejected by the Russian state Duma. Among the reasons for the decision of the Russian State Duma was the possibility that this review bureau could create a trump card against Ukraine. This whole process led to the discrediting of the duties and powers of the Russian Defense Ministry. The Russian leader Vladimir Putin's agreement with the Wagner gang organization to fill the place of approximately 60,000 Russian soldiers who died in the Ukraine-Russia war and supplying about 5,000 Gang members from this group to fight in Ukraine led to an increase in tension in Russia. The Russian administration has put the entire responsibility of the war on the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu. The pro-Putin Kremlin officials who hold Shoigu responsible even for the mistakes caused by Russian President Vladimir Putin continued their efforts to draw attention from the Russian leader without slowing down. Russian Defense Minister Shoigu made a statement in order to soften the mobilization decision rules which dragged Russia into chaos and destruction. A statement came from the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu in an effort to soften the rules of the mobilization decision, which has plunged Russia into chaos and destruction to the professional military experience of 300,000 people whom put in order to join the army immediately. The Russian defense minister underlined that the 300,000 people put in order to join the army immediately would be limited to those with professional military experience. Shoigu also stated that Russian army lost soldiers in Ukraine as 5,397. These figures given by the Russian defense minister are far behind the Western sources and the reports of the Ukrainian defense ministry. The anxious state of the Russian defense minister, who is trying to consolidate the policy of Russian leader Vladimir Putin, did not go unnoticed. The Russian defense minister, who has requested an investigation in the Russian parliament, is trying to carefully follow Putin's orders so that his duties and powers are not taken away. Our response: the decision of Russian leader Vladimir Putin to declare municipalization came from the United Kingdom. British Defense Minister Ben Wallace has words: "No threat and propaganda can hide the fact that Ukraine has won this war. The international community has united and Russia has become a global pariah, quite revealing the situation." While the riots against Vladimir Putin grew like an avalanche and Putin made another shocking statement after the decision to declare mobilization, the Russian leader pointed to Europe as responsible for both the negativities in Russia and the losses in Ukraine, emphasizing that Russia is not in any war at the moment. Putin took a serious political risk by stating that his army was in a special military operation in Ukraine. The Russian leader who took this risk, as the trust of the Russian parliament in Putin was decreasing day by day, did not hesitate to threaten Europe on the nuclear issue. In this television speech where he announced the mobilization decision, Putin also threatened the European authorities by stating that he would use all military weapons and equipment in the army to protect Russia if the pressures of European countries on nuclear weapons continued. The Russian leader drew attention to the potential of nuclear weapons in his country and threatened Europe in an official language. Vladimir Putin continues to walk on a very thin rope with these radical decisions he made, as he tries to get rid of the economic, military, and political effects of the Ukraine-Russia war. The Russian leader encounters another obstacle with each passing day. Since 300,000 Russian citizens gave the order to join the army in order to make up for the deficiencies in the military field, male individuals in their country began to flee with their relatives. Putin, who agrees with the world-famous mercenary group Wagner Group to fight in Ukraine, received reactions from both the parliament and the opposition officials of the Russian Ministry of Defense. This time the political life of the Russian leader and his support staff, who could not solve the problems in any way, do not seem long. Russian people took the streets. Rebellions against Putin began to spread throughout the country without slowing down all these developments. They hear all the revolution that will take place in Russia. Thanks for watching.